Welcome, dear listener, to JadeFox Tales, where ancient myths become the dreams into which you softly descend. I am most grateful for your company this evening and for the quiet moment you have chosen to spend here. Tonight, we journey to the ancient lands of China, where a remarkable child named Nezha was born beneath extraordinary signs, and where his spirit burned as brightly as it was restless. It is a tale of courage, of defiance, and of the quiet journey towards balance that even the most powerful must one day undertake. For in these old stories, strength alone is seldom enough, and the path to understanding is often shaped by both struggle and transformation. You need not follow each word too closely. Should your thoughts begin to wander, you may let them do so. And if sleep should find you before the tale has reached its end, you may welcome it without concern. The story will continue, whether heard or not. Of all things in time find their way towards stillness. Before we begin, let us allow the day to fall gently away. Take a slow breath in and let it go again unhurried. There is no need to guide the breath, only to notice its quiet rhythm. The world beyond this moment may wait. For now, there is nowhere you must be, and nothing that requires your attention. And so, in this quiet interval, we turn gently towards tonight's tale, a story of a child unlike any other, and of the path that would shape his fate. And now, dear listener, let the body rest, let the mind grow still, and allow yourself to drift as the story begins. Long before the coasts of China were traced upon modern maps, when fishermen still read the will of heaven, the turning of tides, there stood a modest garrison near the eastern sea. Behind its stone walls lived a commander of measured temperament and honorable bearing. Though steadfast in duty, his household had long known one quiet sorrow. No child's laughter had ever echoed within its halls. Destiny, when delayed, is not denied. It was said that on the night his son was born, the sky burned not with storm, but with an uncommon glow. A crimson light stretched across the horizon, like silk drawn gently through unseen hands. The sea, too, grew curiously still, as though pausing in expectation. From this omen came a child unlike any other. His name was Nezha. In his earliest days, he did not cry as ordinary infants do. Rather, he regarded the world with bright and searching eyes, as though memory lingered where there should have been none. His limbs were small, yet his presence filled the room with inexplicable vigor. The household attendants whispered among themselves. "He bears the mark of heaven," said one. "Or the mark of trouble," murmured another. For strange things attended his growth. When scarcely able to walk, he displayed strength beyond reason. A wooden training spear, meant only for ornament, he lifted as though it were a reed. Silk ribbons played in his hands, twisted and shimmered as if stirred by hidden wind. And when he laughed, it rang not shrill but bold, as though fearless of consequence. Yet he was not cruel. He wandered often to the shoreline, while waves folded gently upon sand. There he would sit upon the rocks, gazing into the horizon, where sky and sea dissolved into one another. At times, fishermen returning with modest catch would find him watching the tide with peculiar intensity. "You must not venture too near the water, young master," they would caution kindly. "The sea is ruled by powers older than men." Nezha would incline his head, though whether in obedience or contemplation was not easily discerned, for beneath the placid surface of the eastern sea dwelt the dragon king, sovereign of tides, keeper of storms, guardian of the deep. And though the child upon the shore appeared but mortal, threads of fate were already drawing the quiet lines between them. One afternoon, when the air hung warm and heavy, Nezha waded farther into the shallows than before. The water curled above his ankles, cool and inviting. With idle curiosity, he dipped his silk sash into the sea and flicked it lightly across the surface. The ocean responded. A current shifted where none had stirred moments earlier. Small waves rose and fell in a natural rhythm. Far below, within a palace of coral and shadow, ancient eyes opened. The Dragon King felt the disturbance not as injury, but as challenge. Who dares disturb my dominion? He thundered, though his voice travelled only through the veins of water. Above, unaware of the awakening below, the boy smiled faintly as his ribbons danced upon the tide. He did not yet know the measure of his own strength, nor did the sea yet understand the nature of the child who played at its edge. But heaven had marked him, and the stillness before a storm is often gentler than the storm itself. The horizon darkened slightly, though no cloud had yet formed. Thus began the quiet stirring of a legend, not of malice, but of power untempered, and of balance soon to be tested between mortal shore and immortal sea. The afternoon sun lingered pale and heavy above the waters of the eastern sea, casting long reflections that trembled like molten silver upon its surface. Young Nezha stood ankle deep in the tide, his crimson ribbons trailing lightly through the waves. What to him was idle play rippled outwards in widening circles, descending through layers of green and blue into regions seldom touched by mortal presence. Far below, within halls carved of coral and pearl, the sovereign of those depths stirred. The Dragon King of the Eastern Sea, ancient, scaled in shimmering azure, crowned with the authority of storms, felt a disturbance as one might feel a stone cast upon a still pond. It was not the force of the act that unsettled him, but its peculiar quality. This was no fisherman's net, no passing vessel's anchor. It bore a resonance, bright, unyielding, celestial. He rose from his throne of coiled stone, and with him rose the currents of the sea. Above, the waters shifted. The fishermen near the shore exchanged uneasy glances as the tide advanced without wind. Nets swayed where they had hung quietly moments before. The sky, though still cloudless, seemed to dim in subtle hue. Nezha observed the change with curious calm. The sea before him began to swell, not in crashing violence, but in deliberate ascent, as though something fast approached from beneath. A column of water lifted, spiraling upward. From within its gleaming core emerged the form of a dragon, magnificent and terrible, scales catching the sun in fractured light. The fishermen fell to their knees. Nezha did not. Child, the Dragon King's voice rolled like distant thunder across the tide. You disturb the waters that are not yours to command. The boy regarded the towering figure with untroubled gaze. I meant no command, he replied evenly. I only played. The dragon's eye narrowed, twin orbs deep as ocean trenches. Your play unsettles kingdoms beneath the sea. Creatures flee their dwellings. Currents falter. The balance trembles. Nezha glanced at the ribbons in his hand, now gently floating upon the surface. If balance is so easily shaken, he said, then perhaps it was not well anchored. The words were not spoken in arrogance, but in innocence untempered by hierarchy. The sea roiled faintly. The Dragon King circled once within the spiraling waters, studying the boy more closely. He sensed it now, the unmistakable aura of heavenly origin. This was no ordinary child trespassing upon the shore. You bear the scent of the heavens, the dragon declared, yet you stand upon mortal sand. Nezha tilted his head slightly. I stand where my feet have carried me. The simplicity of the answer settled the ancient sovereign more than defiance might have done. For centuries he had ruled tides unquestioned. Storms answered his summons. Mariners offered tributes lest their voyages end in ruin. Yet here stood a child who neither trembled nor boasted, who spoke as though hierarchy was but another current to observe. You must withdraw, the Dragon King commanded at last. The sea is not your realm. Nezha considered this, and the shore, he asked gently, is that not where sea and land meet? The dragon hesitated. It was true. Boundaries, though guarded, were never absolute. Still, pride, ancient and scaled, does not yield easily. The sea yields to none. The Dragon King replied, his voice lowering. A wave surged forward, not to strike the boy, but to press against him in a warning. Nezha planted his feet. His ribbons flared softly, catching the light as though stirred by invisible wind. The water that touched him seemed to hesitate, not retreating, yet not advancing. In that suspended moment, heaven and ocean regarded one another through the quiet figure of a child. The fishermen held their breath. Above them, clouds began at last to gather, slow and contemplative, like witnesses assembling. The Dragon King perceived now that this encounter was no mere accident of play. It was a crossing of destinies. You do not yet comprehend your strength, he said at length. Then perhaps, Nezha answered softly, I must learn. The dragon's form dissolved gradually back into the sea, though the waters did not at once grow calm. A final surge circled the boy before retreating into deeper blue. The tide settled, the sky lightened, yet something irrevocable had begun. Nezha turned towards the shore, his expression thoughtful for the first time. The sea behind him resumed its quiet rhythm, though beneath its surface, currents shifted with renewed vigilance. Power had met power, not in fury, not yet, but in recognition. And recognition, dear listener, is the first stirring of transformation. Days passed after the encounter with the Dragon King, yet the memory of the spiraling waters and the deep, echoing voice lingered in young Nezha's mind. There was not fear that remained, nor excitement alone, but a quiet sense that the world was larger than he had known, and that forces unseen might watch even the smallest acts. At home, his parents noted the change. Though still a child in appearance, Nezha moved with deliberation unusual for his years. He touched the earth, the river, even the household lanterns, as though measuring the spirit of things, seeking balance in all he encountered. The elders of the town whispered to one another of omens. Some recalled tales of children born beneath celestial signs, whose lives were entwined with heaven's will. They spoke of Nezha in hushed tones, calling him the boy of prophecy, yet none dared approach him with fear or ridicule. One evening, a messenger arrived from the imperial court. Word had come that the emperor had learned of the child whose presence had stirred the eastern sea. He had requested that Nezha's father bring the boy to the capital to test his spirit and discern whether this child was boon or bane to the realm. The journey was undertaken with careful preparation. Nezha traveled with his parents, the path winding along rivers and through misted valleys. Along the way, the boy observed the lands he crossed, the fields, the forests, the humble villages, and in each he sensed threads of power connecting the sky, earth, and man. Upon reaching the capital, Nezha was brought before learning sages and court officials. Each sought to test his wisdom, his courage, and his understanding of forces beyond mortal reckoning. Yet the boy answered with clarity and calm, speaking of balance, of respect for both mortal and divine law, and of the responsibilities that accompany power. The emperor, though stern of visage, nodded with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. Such a child is rare indeed, he murmured. He carries both the gift and the burden of heaven. Meanwhile, whispers of the Dragon King's displeasure reached the capital. His emissaries, serpentine beings of the deep sea, had begun to stir, questioning why a mortal child dared trespass upon their dominion. The celestial and terrestrial threads converged, drawing Nezha into a destiny he had not yet fully comprehended. One night, as lanterns glimmered in the palace gardens and the world lay hushed beneath a crescent moon, Nezha walked alone to a quiet terrace. It gazed towards the eastern sea, now distant but ever present in memory. The waves seemed to murmur secrets, as though recognizing the boy who had once walked their edge unafraid. And in the depths, the Dragon King lingered, watching, waiting, and measuring the courage of the child who would not only walk between worlds, but one day command them. Nezha, unaware of the full scope of his destiny, breathed in the night air. Within him stirred a calm determination, the kind that precedes trials, yet is not daunted by them. For even in innocence, he had begun to understand that power without wisdom may falter, that courage without balance may crumble, and that destiny, once touched, moves inexorably forward. Thus the boy prepared, though he did not yet know for what, and the heavens, the sea, and the realms of men alike took notice of the child destined to shape them all. The seasons stand as they are wont to do, with the sun tracing its slow arc across the heavens, and the moon shedding silver upon fields, rivers, and distant mountains. Young Nezha, now growing in stature and understanding, continued his training under the watchful eye of the Emperor's sages and the quiet counsel of his parents. Yet the world was not idle. Rumors of imbalance spread beyond the capital. Coastal villages whispered of storms born too swiftly, of sea creatures behaving oddly, and of strange omens in the skies. The Dragon King, mindful of the boy who had touched his domain, stared within the deep, preparing to confront the mortal who defied the sea's natural rhythm. Nezha, however, faced each challenge with measured resolve. He learned to wield his spear with precision, to command his spirit as much as his body, and to temper his innate strength with wisdom beyond his years. It was said that even when he rested, the air around him hummed softly, as if recognizing the convergence of mortal heart and celestial favor. One fateful day, the Dragon King emerged from the eastern sea, vast and formidable, the water swelling around him like living walls. The capital's courtiers trembled, yet Nezha remained calm, holding his spear lightly, his ribbons fluttering in the rising wind. You meddle in affairs that are not yours, the Dragon King roared, his voice rolling over the waves and shaking the distant hills. The seas are mine, yet you tread them as though they were mere sand beneath your feet. Nezha spoke quietly, yet every word carried the weight of both earth and heaven. Your waters are mighty as they should be, he said, but the balance of life touches both land and sea. If power is wielded without care, it falters. If fear governs your dominion, the harmony you guard is undone. For a moment, the wind held its breath. The Dragon King, though immense and immortal, perceived a truth within the child's words, a wisdom refined by arrogance, tempered by courage, and guided by the hand of heaven itself. Then the battle began, not as mere combat, but as a dance of strength, wit, and understanding. Waves and wind intertwined with the boy's movements. The Dragon King unleashed torrents and surging currents. Nezha countered with agility, clever stratagems, and a calm heart. Each strike, each motion conveyed the understanding that force alone is insufficient, that true mastery requires balance of spirit and body. Hours passed, yet fatigue touched neither entirely, for this was no ordinary contest. It was a trial ordained by fate, meant to shape a hero who would not protect only mortal realms, but also the delicate weave of heaven and earth. At last, with a careful maneuver and a display of restraint rather than brute force, Nezha brought the Dragon King to a pause, not in submission, but in recognition. The waters stilled, the wind softened, and in that silence, the child and sovereign perceived harmony, the understanding that strength tempered by wisdom ensures order, while recklessness invites chaos. The Dragon King withdrew to the depths, his voice gentle, carrying both warning and respect. You are unlike any mortal, he said, yet perhaps you are not entirely of this world either. Nezha watched the waves calm, the tide returning to its measured rhythm. He understood, at last, the weight of the destiny placed upon him, that courage alone was not sufficient, that compassion and foresight must temper might. The villagers, the emperor, and even the distant heavens seemed to breathe a quiet sigh of relief. The boy, now recognized not only as extraordinary but as a guardian of balance, returned home with a calm smile. And so, dear listener, the legend of Nezha endures, a tale of a child who walked the line between heaven and earth, who learned that true power is guided by wisdom, and reminds us that courage and care are always intertwined. When next the waves lap softly against the shore, or when the wind whispers through the bamboo, recall the balance and courage may reside even in the smallest of hearts. The legend of Nezha is complete, yet the echoes of his tale ripple through time, awaiting those who listen with patience, wonder, and care.